Welcome to the Marathon Investigation Podcast, where we discuss and debate the latest news regarding course cutters, bandits, and bib mules.
Welcome to the Marathon Investigation Podcast. This is Derek Murphy, along with my co-host, Scott Coomer. Scott, say hi.
Hey, everybody.
All right. Today on the podcast, we have Sabrina Little. Sabrina is a very accomplished ultra runner. She's, I believe, been the national champion 100 miler on USATF trail 100 miler, I believe, 4 times with her wins at Rocky Raccoon. She's formerly held the 24-hour female record for set at, I think, North Coast 24, and then again in the World Championships. She'll explain that better than I can because there's a little interesting story there as well. And again, she's just a great runner, and she's also wrote a recent article regarding her opinions on cheating, which we'll definitely get into. Sabrina, welcome.
Thanks so much. I'm glad you had me here.
Yeah, thanks. And I don't know if you remember, the first time I saw Sabrina, or I knew of Sabrina, was at, I think it was the Spring North Coast 24 in 2012 that you won. Does that ring a bell with you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I believe that was the race that had timing issues. So the timing, none of it was electronically timed. It was all manually timed. And I think Sabrina set what would have been a record at the time, but it was never ratified because of the timing issues.
It was eventually ratified. But I don't know. There were a couple of people who were timing by hand. It was very confusing and it was very stressful, but it was ratified at first. Yes.
Okay, yeah, it took a while. I know for me, and again, I did about less than half the laps that you did, but I'm keeping count, and I was, I thought I was, had about 5 more laps than they told me I did, and so that just kind of got in my head. I'm sure they were probably right, but it was a little bit frustrating, so I can imagine, when you're going for a record, and, I think it was pretty tight, at the time where I think you broke it by maybe a mile or 2, if that. Yeah. But then again, then you went ahead and you broke that again the next year at the Worlds, I believe. Is that?
Yes.
Yep. And that stood until 2017, when all of a sudden it just, with a number of people put up some great times. Then Camille most recently broke the world's 24-hour record. So that's Sabrina. So you haven't done any fixed times lately. Are you planning on doing any more 24 hours or 48 hours coming up?
I think eventually I'll get back to the 24 hours. But recently I've been enjoying trying faster, shorter stuff. I mean, it's all relative, but I've been doing 50K through 100 miles. And it's more compatible with the training style that I like. I really like going out for hard tempo runs and doing speed work on the track and things like that. So I'm enjoying what I'm doing now again for the timed events.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and shorter events. I mean, you just won. You've won the 100-mile Rocky Raccoon. You recently ran, I think it was the 50K in Dallas, and you won that. I think you were the overall winner of that race. So, any marathons coming up? I know you've won a marathon in the past, and are you doing any more marathons?
Yeah, I think this year I want to attempt to go for an OTQ, so that would be 2:45 or faster. And it's going to be a tall order, but it's definitely a challenge that I'm excited about, and it's getting me out the door every day. So, yeah, I'm going to give it a go. Awesome.
Do you know what race you're going to try to do that at?
I'm aiming at Grandma's.
Okay, that's a good race. I've worked with them, not officially, but yeah, that's a very well run race from what I hear. I think that's held. When is that?
It's in June or July.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I think they've had some very hot ones, so hopefully the weather will cooperate.
I have a quick question. I'm looking at your ultra sign up, and I see that your first ultra was Mountain Masochist. Did you get into ultra running via Horton?
Well, so that was my first official race. I had run 100 miles on my own the year before, which I did as a fundraiser, and I didn't know that ultra running existed at the time when I did that. but the Horton race was my first official race.
That's great.
Yeah, I remember noticing, because at the North Coast 24, and I think maybe you did it once before. That was the first. Well, I did the fall prior to the one that you ran, and I noticed it was an older crowd, and it's like we didn't get many. You were definitely, I think you're probably the youngest competitor there. Even that year, it was kind of nice to see some of the younger, talented, fresher legs running those distances. In my head, to that point, it was all okay. Yeah, people are kind of too slow, but so we run farther as we get older and at slower pace. And I was kind of in my head for what the typical ultra runner was, and it's lately that's been dispelled many times over. But back then, my impression of the ultra runner was okay, old people who can't run fast anymore, we can just run further. So
yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So I think there is a lot of that, like people who get tired of, their marathon time slowing down and things like that. But I'm so excited that there's this new excitement around the sport, and people my age and a lot younger now are getting started, and the times are improving. And it's just a really great time in particular to be a female in the sport because we have like a great kind of mutual edification going on, and we're all encouraging each other and getting faster.
Yeah, Scott knows Camille real well. She's been on the show, and she's been in Scott's basement willingly, and
I've had 2 of the 3 comrades, champions from America, staying at my house and living in my basement for some period of time. So all I need is Alberto, and I got all 3 of them.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, okay, I want to get into the reason I thought of contacting you for this podcast in particular was you recently wrote an article. You write for I Run Far, and in addition to your blogs, which, again, I love. I suggest anybody, look up Sabrina, and her blogs are entertaining. It's the best race reports, and, she manages to throw humor in there. A couple things I want to talk about was her recent article on I Run Far, just kind of about cheating and integrity, and kind of goes beyond just simple cheating, more about the integrity, and then also about her experience. I want to talk to you about the blood test, all the tests that you have to do when you compete at your level. So first we'll talk about the article on I Run Far. Again, I was particularly interested in it because you focus more on you mentioned cheating and how it's an issue mostly related to blood doping, but then also how it kind of stems from integrity and when nobody's watching and you're coaching. Just kind of share your thoughts real quickly, just on overview of what the article was about and what your thoughts are.
Right. Okay. So stop me if I just keep talking too much, but I started sort of with coarse-grained details of my own experiences with like the doping situation and having to take those tests, and I have a ton to say about like those experiences if you're interested in them. But
yes,
I think. Oh, you want me to?
Oh,
start there,
yeah, absolutely, yeah. Just talk. I'd rather have you talk than me.
Okay, sure. Well, so I didn't really know anything about like doping controls or what that involved until my first experience in a world championship. So when I went to the 24-hour world in 2013, they told us in the team meeting that some people, particularly those who were considered like that might do well in the race, might get selected for drug testing. So I did, in fact, get my name pulled, and that was really cool. Like, I don't know, it just seems like a fun, kind of like unique experience to get to do, to go like and give your blood. And yeah, I don't know. It's not like I'm worried about anything with respect to my own integrity. So it was a cool experience. But then the day after, so I ran the race, and in the final couple of miles, I was sort of I don't know, at the end of a 24-hour run, you're a little bit spacey, you're not completely there. But I was like vaguely aware that there was a Dutch woman following me on a bicycle. So as soon as like the timer buzzed over the loudspeaker, I just popped down on the ground like I was done. It had been like sleeting and we were brick, and I was ready to be done. But the woman stopped her bicycle and she said, "Oh, you have to get up. You have to come with me. We have to do doping." And so that time I was like, "Oh, this is a little less fun than the first time." But okay. So I went with her to doping, and was there with the other people who podiumed that day. I got our drug tests, and we were freezing at this point because, you know, we had been in the sleet. We'd been outside for 24 hours. Netherlands is not like a tropical scenario. So yeah, we were really cold and like shaking, but we had to go directly to the award ceremony. So it took me like a really long time to recover from that race. And I think like part of it was booted me. I was freezing. But anyway, like I totally think it's really important that we have those doping checks in place, because I don't want to compete against someone who's cheating, and I don't think my competitors do. And one note I made in the article is just, you know, like even cheaters don't want to compete against cheaters because cheating only works against a backdrop of people following the rules, right? So then after that point, I went back to the United States and was called WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, and USATF, the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency,
Yes.
And I was added to both of their lists. And what that means is, for WADA, it means that every day, so for both of them, you have to give them your 24-hour schedule 3 months in advance. So you do it 4 times every year, 3 months in advance, where you're going to be every day. So, like, you vaguely know, like, if you have a job. I was teaching at the time, so I would put my school hours. It's kind of difficult as a trail runner to be that accurate because I think it's more suited to track runners. Like, they ask you your training location. And I would just put a series of zip codes that I plan to run through. That's the best I could do. Or like the name of a forest or something. And, you know, if they tried to find me, then it wouldn't be so great. And then you have to give them a 60-minute, for the IWAS or WADA, the World Anti-Doping, you give them a 60-minute window that they will typically come in. And so one of the doping checks is they can come anytime during the day. And then the other one is they're going to come in the 60-minute time frame. So I made it in the evening eventually, but at first I just thought, well, they probably won't come for me. You know, like I got to be really low in the priority. Right. Like, yeah, like I'm a trail runner. I'm not making any money from this sport. Like, it's just not going to be a big deal. So they did actually come, you know, like a number of times. One time they came, I was teaching medieval history. I was teaching Columbus. We were doing the New World. And then the doping official came in and he said he had to take me for a drug test. And I was so embarrassed because, like, I really like to keep my two spheres distinct. Like, there's my work life and there's my run life. And my run life is just recess. But it just felt like, oh man, like, it's just like messing up my other life. And I had to tell the students, like, I'm not suspected of doping. Like, I don't do drugs. This is just something that happens sometimes if you compete at a high level. So that was one day. Most of the time they just kind of like would show up at my house. I still, like, because I was on the list for maybe like 2.5 years, I still, like, anytime there's a random car in front of my house, I just assume it's anti-doping coming to give me a test, but it's not actually anymore. Another time I was interviewing for graduate school, and there was the accepted students kind of banquet, and anti-doping came there. I was like, no. So I had to excuse myself from some conversations with future professors and say, like, again, like, I'm not suspected of anything. This is just something that happens for my hobby sometimes.
Do you think they're, like, picking those times on purpose? Like, they have a sick sense of humor and they want to find the most embarrassing time for you?
Well, oh man, I don't know what it is. But I mean, those 2 times were pretty bad. But I mean, they actually, the agents were lovely. I was actually always happy to see them because they were so friendly. And one even said, like, I thought you were on a Florida vacation, so I didn't come that week. You know, like, sometimes they'll, you know, deal kindly with you, but oftentimes, like, my agent would be visiting me, and then also the people, I was in Waco, but they would be driving up to the Dallas area, and we would all be hit kind of the same, over the same couple of days. So there wasn't, like, a ton of control there. And again, like, I am all about this process, and I think it's so important that we have this accountability. But on the other hand, I just felt like, why me? Like, I'm going to school, like, being trained to be an ethicist. Like, I study morality, like, for my job. I'm not really a runner. Like, it's like the thing that I do for fun. So yeah, sometimes I felt bad for myself, but that, you know, would remind myself that this is actually really important, and there are people who aren't following the rules.
Yeah, I don't know of any. Again, I don't follow the drug cheating as well, but yeah, I don't know many in the ultra world. I don't know if anybody who's been busted for drug use in the ultra world. Maybe there has been.
There's been a few high profile cases in Europe, but I can't think of anybody. And maybe you know this, that, you know, went through this WADA process, or, you know, had to give the samples and got caught in that process.
Right. Yeah, I don't know anybody who was caught in the process. I mean, I know of people who've been caught, but not through the process of drug testing.
Yeah. So I was reading this article, and I think that one of the things that that really jumped out at me when reading it, and I've read a lot about doping and a lot about cheating, is that it seems that your whole take on this is that while cheating seems to be somewhat a cultural problem rather than people that want to do bad acts specifically. You know, that there's this and you kind of talk a little bit about integrity, and it harkened me back to, and I don't know if you've ever read this, especially if you're studying ethics, you probably did. It's Stephen Carter wrote a book about integrity.
No, I've not heard of this. Who's the author?
He's Stephen Carter. He's a law professor at Harvard, at Yale.
Oh, interesting.
And it's a book just called Integrity, and he kind of comes out with, you know, like a formula to some extent about, you know, first you have to distinguish right from wrong, then you have to act in accordance with that, and then there's this third element of if there's a personal price, you know, that there's, you know, that we talked about on this show before, that, you know, you talked about in your coaching, that there's a lot of places in our society, including sports, where if you get away with something, or if you cut the corner, or if you cheat a little bit and nobody notices, you're thought to be, you know, tricky, or as a heads-up play, or something like that. You know, like you've deceived the umpires, but we know that you didn't catch the ball. You never come out and say, hey, I didn't catch this, or, you know, I committed a foul that they didn't call out of it. You know, he would argue that the acts of the greatest integrity are when you have the most to lose and you do what's right in the face of that.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, I liked what you said at the beginning about it being a cultural problem. Like, one thing I tried to emphasize is that I don't think cheating is something that is unique to running. I mean, I think that sports oftentimes are a window to the people we are in the rest of our lives. And the research shows, like, we do cheat quite a bit. I cited a book. It's called The Character Gap, and it was from last year. It's by Christian Miller, and he talks about something. It's called the puzzle of limited cheating. It's just the fact that we don't like full on cheat and do things that are just like, well, I mean, some people do, but like most of us don't recklessly cheat or do things that are blatantly wrong that will be noticed for right away. Like we'll cheat in small ways, and part of that is because we don't want other people to think of us as cheaters, but part of it is also like a sort of self-deception. Like if you only cheat a little bit, like fudging a couple answers rather than all of them on a test, you feel a little bit better about yourself and can kind of explain it away. So I think that cheating like happens in these broad strokes in ways in which like people cut courses or take EPO or do other things that are clearly wrong. But I think that it happens to a lesser degree in a lot of us. Like there are lots of breaches of integrity, just kind of all around.
Well, I think that are still there? Did we lose her?
What
was that?
Nope, we're here.
Okay. I think that, like what you said, I agree with this, especially this puzzle, but I think there's like another element, and that's that we'll cheat willingly to the extent that we can morally justify it in our head. And that some people might do something that's blatant cheating to us, but as long as in their mind, because we've confronted some of these cheaters, I think that if you have a basis in your head, as sick and twisted as it might be, and it might be as sick and twisted as I never win anything, therefore this one time I'm going to cheat. But I bet you if you put those people under a lie detector test, they would feel that they did not cheat because they had such a strong and overwhelming moral reason for doing what they did.
Yeah, I don't know if necessarily their reason is always moral. Maybe it's like just prudential or something else, but yeah, there's a book called Evil, which is a really cute title for a book, but it's by Roy Baumeister. He's a cognitive scientist, and he talks about this sort of like kind of blindness. Like perpetrators often are blind to what they're doing and kind of explain it away. So it's like a kind of an attributional bias. So I look at you and I say, oh, you stole a pencil. That's because you're a thief. And I look at myself and I say, I stole a pencil, but, well, like I forgot my pencil and it was just like a really hectic day. And like we see all these sorts of situational reasons kind of giving us permission for doing the bad thing. So we judge others by their actions and ourselves by our intentions and a net of circumstances.
Yeah, it's funny, and it just reminded me that my 9-year-old daughter came home from school the day and she goes, "Hey, it's okay to steal." I'm like, well, my teacher said it was okay. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Well, it's okay to steal. It's okay if you steal food. So I'm like, well, not really. You can't go in the store and steal food. I think she, was, but again, they were even kind of talking, not so black and white, or it's okay to lie. And I'm like, well, maybe if somebody asks me, do I look nice today? You don't want to hurt their feelings. And she, I think she kind of understood that, but I'm like, God, the teachers are telling my daughter that it's okay to steal food. She's going to go in a Kroger and start taking Cheetos or something. I don't know what. But along in the same things, like, yeah, in certain circumstances, you could see where it's morally justified to, for somebody to take food and, in a certain situation and that. So, yeah, so that kind of reminded me, of that and the kind of the gray areas between, okay, when's it okay to lie? When's it okay to do something that's not strictly within the rules? It's never okay.
Well,
okay. Hey, honey, how do I look? And does my hair look okay, honey?
No, that's tell the truth. Kids, tell the truth. Friends dying of cancer, tell the truth. Only time you don't tell the truth is to save someone from a bigger moral wrong that involves physical harm, a higher level of harm. I.e., is Sabrina hiding in the closet? The Nazis are here for her. That's the only time you can lie. Everything else, I don't care if your kid is dying of cancer. You tell them the truth.
Yeah, that is actually the great example. The Nazi at the door case or the Rahab and the spies case is the one that Augustine uses. But yeah, you have like a higher commitment to some other moral duty or something like that. But I often don't, when I teach like honesty and cheating, I don't start with those examples. Like I start with, most of the time, if you think you have to lie, it's a failure of moral imagination. You really need to think about it, because language itself, like James Davidson Hunter says, language is a covenant between words spoken and the reality to which they refer. And if you break that covenant, if your words no longer reflect reality, then they don't mean anything for any of us.
Well, and so let's say that Sabrina's my wife and she asks me if she looks cute in this dress, and I lie and tell her she does. Then the next lie I could justify under the same reasoning, right? If I'm just saying I lie not to hurt her feelings, then why don't I lie when I cheat on her? Why don't I lie when I steal her money, or or I talk bad about her behind her back?
Oh, no,
there's a good book. There's a Sam Harris book called Lying. It's like 50 pages, and it just kind of summarizes the whole idea right all by itself.
Oh, I agree. And, like as kids, like, okay, you could tell one little lie to your parents. Where were you? Oh, I was at someone's house. And then you've got to tell another lie to cover that up. And then all of a sudden, one little thing turned into something, something huge. And I've seen that in running cases, where it's somebody accidentally swapped a bib with her husband. They wore the wrong bib, and then also she placed and she won in her age group, or she placed really high. People started congratulating her before she realized what happened. She's like, "Oh, thanks very much." The next time they did that intentionally, and then she's getting trophies, and it's so it was like it was a mistake that turned into a little lie, and then got out of control over a couple of years. So it was it's there's definitely something to that.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis calls that metanoia. Like, you make decisions that are small and they kind of build into another, and then suddenly it's like out of control. Like, you have this solidified character and a pattern of acting, and you can't necessarily see it as wrong anymore. Like a binding of your own will.
Yeah, like when we talk about like that Kelly Agnew case and things like that, I said, don't tell me that guy woke up one morning and said, I'm going to engage in a snowballing effect of cheating that's going to result in me doing things as ridiculous as hiding in bathrooms. I think it's like the little cheat, the little lie, and then it just built and built and built and built, and then eventually it was just, I don't know, your head's just screwed up.
Yeah, you know the Kelly Agnew case that he's talking about, Sabrina?
I do, yes.
Yeah,
and part of me is like, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so part of it is I know that people have to be held accountable. And I'm like very torn because, I think that if someone blatantly cheats to such an extent that they kind of abuse or hurt the sport in a substantial way, then there should be lasting consequences. But I also think like that part of justice is grace, that eventually like a person is sort of, cleared socially, or like kind of restored to a community in some sort of way. So I don't know, like there's part of me, like when I saw the Kelly case and I saw like everybody talking about it, there was a big part of me that said like, yeah, this is terrible. And like a lot of people were hurt through this. And the same thing with EPO cases, like, wow, like you really shouldn't be granted liberty into the sport, and be able to compete against us when you're not competing with us, right? But then there's also part of me that says like that there's grace extended by the people in the community, maybe not in terms of like permission to run again, but just like a hand extended,
I'm 100% with you. My thing is, I took issue with like what I call the Lance Armstrong rule that Western states enacted that just said if you've been banned for doping or cheating from some other sport, that you're banned from life from Western states. And I said, whoa! What if you're a really, really troubled person that made a lot of bad decisions and went down a really bad road, and then you righted that wrong later in life, and then you discovered trail running? Now, I'm not saying that we should allow all those people to come in carte blanche. All I said is there should be a mechanism by which I could go in front of that board and lay down and say, you can slap me around all you want, but I'm begging you to let me run. And they could say no. But I should have a way to say, this is why. I was a drug addict. I was an alcoholic. I was an abused child. I went through a bad divorce. Whatever the reason is that someone did something goofy, I think we have to show those people empathy. I think that we're better people when we show those people empathy than anyone else. And we have to realize that they're not broken and that change is possible, even though it might be unlikely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really hard question. It's really muddy waters.
Yeah, it's tough. And I don't know with Kelly, I mean, he's chosen not chosen not to run, but I think there's probably races that he could enter and run, probably not any of the races where he was disqualified from. I'm not sure if everyone said he's banned for he can't come back here. I know some did, or if it's just he's disqualified and he's feels outcasted and is never going to run again. Now he probably if he ran again legitimately, he'd probably be middle of the pack runner. I would guess it wouldn't be at the same.
I think there should be a path, but I think those people need to just sit down and say, I did it. This is why I did it. I'm sorry I did it. I'm not going to do it again. Let me run. Don't even give me a place, but I want to be a participant and I want to make it up to you. I think that's the way you get back in the sport. No,
and I agree with you. I wrote about the article I just published on Maud Gorman. There were like 3 races that she was disqualified from that she had podiumed, where she cut the course. But unfortunately, it's the exception where she admitted, yeah, I cut the course. Yeah, I cheated. Yeah, I stole podium spots. She apologized to those, that were affected and wants to move on, And she is, out of hundreds of cases that I've written about, she's about the only one. There might maybe a couple more that have admitted, what they did and that was purposeful. I've had people. The case I always bring up is the guy who it was a 2-loop marathon around a lake, 13 miles. 2 laps. He missed a lap and he claimed it was accidental and he didn't realize it and he would have won the marathon. It's just absurd, excuses and people forging, GPS data and just doing everything else, forging finishing line photos. I've got all kinds of that. And that's more common than someone saying, yes, I cheated, I'm sorry. And so when the person says, yeah, I cheated, I'm sorry, I don't want to, what I said with the Maud case, I don't want to nitpick, all the semantics of it. She said, I made a mistake. I have people saying, well, it's not a mistake if she made a mistake and, it was, what she's saying. She didn't say it was an error, and she accidentally cut the course. She made a mistake in judgment, when she decided to cut the course. So I don't want to nitpick all those apologies, because if we do that, then why would anybody ever admit to it? If we're just as harsh on people who say they do it as those who fake their, as those who lie. So I tend to be more sympathetic to the people who admit to it than probably most of my reader followers are.
So I have another question then for Sabrina, based on this idea of it being a cultural problem. And, when I first started ultra running in 2011, 12, 13, there didn't seem to be a lot of talk of doping and cheating. And there seems to be a lot more talk now. And I'm wondering what you think about the idea that maybe the problem culturally is that there are people coming to the sport not to become good runners, not to become good distance runners, not to, push themselves to do the best 24-hour 100-mile or whatever that they can, but more or less bucket listers who just want the buckle, and then they can say that they did it, and then they go off into the distance.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. I have a number of thoughts. So first of all, I think when I said cultural problem, I do mean cultural problem, but I also mean like human problem. Like I think that just the way people are is pretty bad sometimes. Like we're just prone to look for exceptions and shortcuts in every domain. The question you asked about the changing culture within running is definitely an important one. Like I do think you're right about entering the sport not to kind of like be changed by the sport, but to collect buckles, like being very motivated by outcome instead of process. I've been running ultra since 2007. And over the course of that time, like, I don't know, like I've even noticed in my own mindset, like when I did my first 100, like I wasn't thinking, I mean, I did it because it didn't fit neatly into my imagination, and I knew that it would ask everything of me, and I didn't know if I could do it standing on the start line. And now when I enter races, I'm thinking, I have this specific time goal, and I want to compete at a level that's satisfying to me, like with respect to my personal history in the sport and a number of things. And I think like a lot of people are sort of having more so the second mindset these days, and wanting to be competitive or wanting sort of a social recognition that didn't exist before. Like, ultra running was so weird that, I mean, I didn't tell people like what I did, and nowadays, like, people can get social recognition for it, and it does mean something to have a buckle. And I think having these sort of like outcome goals instead of caring about the sort of person you have to become in order to achieve those goals is a shift in perspective that is ultimately going to be harmful to integrity in the sport.
Yeah, it's again the whole thing, the social media aspect of it, where it's are we finding? Do you think we're finding more cheaters because of social media, or more people are cheating because of social media, or somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, it's probably both. And I mean, you can't hide if you're on Strava, but yeah, I think definitely like we're a shame glory culture, and people can get glory, like real cheap glory, just by posting things on social media.
Yeah,
I think they sneak in and they get their 50-mile finish and they put their buckle and all their friends think they're badass, and then that's it, and then they go away.
Yeah, what happens now is it used to be you'd tell your friends at the at the office or running club, hey, I did that, and they'll roll their eyes and that would be it. But now you have somebody you post it on social media, somebody's going to question it, and I'm going to get an email or whatever, which. Again, that most of what I write about now, I get tips from somebody who was bragging about, who posted something on Strava or on, social media, and that they're like, okay, hey, I know that person didn't qualify for Boston, or there's no way that person, ran the, 100 miler with a 5-hour negative split. You know what I'm talking about there, Scott. But so it's just.
So I have another question, and that's that. So I'm reading this article, and I see that you're kind of reflecting on this 2013 24-hour championship, and I wanted to know, like, what was it that prompted you to write this article now?
Well, a number of things. One was that, I've seen recently people talking about cheating scenarios. And just today, another 219 marathoner was outed for something like EPO. So it just seemed like something that was relevant, but also I had just read that Character Gap book and was thinking about cheating more generally than just being the doping cases. So I write every month, and so whatever happens to be at the top of my brain that day is what I end up committing to. There have definitely been recent conversations about doping. I think Camille Herron recently was talking about, at the time when I wrote the article, she was talking about how there's no one currently among ultra runners who's on any of these doping lists, and that she's tried to get on. And so we're not actually being held accountable, which is very scary.
Can you explain that? I'm not totally sure I understand what you mean by that.
Right. So the World Anti-Doping out-of-competition test, what I was speaking about at the beginning, where they would kind of come get me whenever they wanted to make sure I was on the straight and narrow. No one is on those lists anymore. Camille Herron had gone to, I guess, the recent USATF meeting and asked just sort of the statistics about who is on those doping tests these days, and they said that there's not one trail or ultra runner who is currently being tested in the United States out of competition.
Why is that?
I think it's expensive is one thing. And I mean, it often seems like the USATF kind of to us, like, I mean, it's a lot better now than it was even 4 or 5 years ago, because we have people like Tracy Falbo and Camille stepping up and saying, like, we need more travel support for world championships and better representation. But yeah, I mean, drug testing is very expensive. I mean, there's resistance from races often because they just can't finance it. So yeah, I think money and practicality is a big thing.
Has anybody ever talked about like coming up with an alternative to the current system, like some sort of like a way to have a race certified by USATF, and if it's USATF certified, then there's a clause that anybody who finishes in first place could be drug tested, or just like any kind of way to make a more effective, like how when you read books about like concealed carry, they always say if you don't know if the guy's got a gun, then you're less likely to commit the crime. The same way, if you don't know if they're going to drug test you randomly at one of these races, you might be less likely to cheat.
Right, and I think that's the tact that Western states took. I don't know if it was this past year, but definitely 2 years ago, they had a clause like that, and I think the top 10 were tested. But it's definitely on the race's prerogative to do it, and it's definitely financially difficult.
Is it more important as a competitor like you to have the testing be done outside of competition?
Yes. Although, well, so yes, out of competition, because people often, the way that they describe these tests, these drug tests, are that they're intelligence tests, basically, because you can microdope all the time, but if it's not in the window of time when you're being tested, then you'll get away with it. And so if you just paper back on whatever drugs you're taking before you get to the test, then you're going to be in the clear. But if you're surprised, then ostensibly you can't hide.
Do you have any kind of sense as to the prevalence of doping in trail and ultra running?
I've heard whispers, more so in the past, not necessarily among the elite, but I've heard more so that it's common among like age groupers, people who are not, at the front of the pack. I just I'm pretty naive. I try not to think about it. It's all, it's going to be suspicious if someone comes out of nowhere or has like a crazy improvement over a short period of time. Like, there are limits to biological potential, but in every case, I'm just going to assume the best in everyone, and because you can't really compete with that monkey on your back.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to filibuster, and Derek's probably like sitting there looking at the screen going, why don't you shut up, Scotty?
No, you're good. I'm thinking, what am I going to ask next? You guys are talking. You're talking way above me. The intelligence, you got two geniuses talking, and here I am.
Next level interviewing, Derek. We'll have a course on that at some point in time. The other question I was thinking is, from an ethical standpoint, we know that drug testing isn't perfect. That people have tested positive who weren't doping. What kind of concerns does that raise to you as an ethicist in terms of, especially when we have these rules like, say, this Lance Armstrong rule, right? So Coomer tests positive and he's banned from Western states for the rest of his life. But, it's not a perfect process.
Right. Well, I mean, that's a hard, difficult question. I mean, yeah, so oftentimes these tests aren't testing for everything that we think they're testing, or they might give us a false sense of security, but ultimately it's better than nothing. I mean, as far as there needs to be some sort of accountability, and some sort of fear in people's hearts, because I mean, the reality is that there are going to be people who are cheating. That said, I do think we need to spend more time in youth athletics and just with kids talking about, like, you know, building the right habits of integrity and talking about what integrity means and what cheating means and how it doesn't, how, like, the outcomes that you think are going to fill you up aren't going to be satisfying because we're never going to be able to screen adequately for everything, but we can head it off by building people of character who want the right things out of sport.
Yeah, I mean, I think that most of us that were in sports have had those coaches or those mentors or those people that kind of instilled the ethic in us of right or wrong. But I don't know if that happens today. You know, like while you're talking about kids today, first thing I thought of is if you play video games, which I don't really, but I did when I was a kid. Like one of the great things that you do is you get a magazine that gives you all the cheat codes. You know, but like it seems like we don't stigmatize that. Like it's the culture is let's try and find a way to get there quicker and easier and better, and not think about the fact that maybe it's more fun to suck for a long time to get better, or in running to train for a long time to get better. It'd be easier to just find a shortcut.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I honestly don't know whose job it is to instill like these lessons always, like with the youth. But I do think to a large extent it's just not happening anymore. Like C.S. Lewis has that quote in Abolition of Man: "We make men without chests and expect from them virtue and enterprise. We laugh at honor and are shocked to find traitors in our midst." Like we're just not educating for character anymore, and someone needs to take up the responsibility and do it.
I have one proposal. It's a little far-fetched, but, I hate these superhero movies. They're everywhere. But what if we required those people to teach ethics and integrity through the superhero movies? So at least they'd be useful for something, and then, kids would look up to these superheroes who are doing the right thing all the time.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad idea. So oftentimes, like, cultures rely on moral exemplars or heroes to show you what is good, and kids emulate those heroes. And I think it is the case that that would move kids like to see what is, see the world in moral terms.
Yeah, but then they're vigilantes. So technically, the heroes they're breaking the law too. So when is it? When is it?
Oh yeah, vigilante justice.
I've been called that. Yeah, I've been. Yeah, I'm a vigilante, and I made myself the marathon police, and who appointed me, all that stuff. And I hear that, and that's fine. So kind of along those lines, and you touched on it in your article as far as the shaming. Okay, yes, there has to be accountability, but when does it go too far, kind of thing. Overall, what do you think? Where do you kind of draw the line? Like, if you were in charge of Marathon Investigation, if you were like editing my site and had control over me, at what point would you say, yes, this should be written about, or hey, no, this person shouldn't be held accountable publicly? Yeah, do you have kind of like a moral line, or to where somebody should be called out versus where they shouldn't be?
Oh, that's a really hard question. I think you do a great job with people who are sorry, like giving them a chance to apologize. And honestly, I'm very torn because there's part of me that says when someone cheats, in a significant way, if they are consciously and intentionally and often repeatedly in many of the cases that you draw out, doing things to violate the spirit of the sport, then if we do extend grace to them, it shouldn't be within sport. There should be a closing of doors in some sort of way. But that's just me thinking about personally, as an athlete, I'm speaking as an athlete, not as an ethicist right now, because I'm not equipped to have this question, to answer this question. But I just think, like, personally, if someone took EPO and that's in their system for a long period of time, like, having them stand next to me on a starting line would really not it would be a little upsetting to me. But I don't know, like, the thing about the internet is, like, there's no grace over the long term. Like, if I ruled the world or something, I might make it so that, like, after they are made accountable for the situation, maybe the article disappears after a month or something, so that they can reckon with their wrong and, yes, be held accountable, but then also continue to be a human. Like, we're all kind of messy and we all make mistakes, and it can destroy a person over the rest of their life if you're never set free from something. Like, even prisons are supposed to be therapeutic. Like, they're supposed to transform you and hold you accountable to something, but then also allow you to progress from that moment. So I don't know. I mean, it's like an impossible question for anyone to answer, and I think you'll get a number of different responses based on what athlete you ask.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious, because
what kind of astonishes me is that, this idea that I could go out and rape old ladies, like 10 of them, and get arrested and go to jail and serve my time and come out of jail and say, I'm not sorry, but I did my time, so screw you, and you got to let me run your race. But if I was and I always give the same example, and you probably have never heard, so I don't think it'd be new to you, but, like, let's say that I'm a 14-year-old girl who has problems connecting with her dad, and you're kind of a forgotten child, and you've never gotten the attention you deserve. Maybe you were abused or something like that, and then you go into track and you succeed, and all of a sudden you're getting attention and affirmation and love and all the things that you've craved your whole life because you're kind of screwed up. And in order for you to keep that rolling, you make a bad decision and you cheat, or you take some performance-enhancing drugs, and for whatever reason. Now, should that girl, when she's 40 and has turned her whole life around and discovers trail running, should she be banned forever from lining up at Western States because of that? While the guy that rapes the old ladies is fine? I don't think so. I think there should, I think there should be a way for someone to say, I cheated. Here's why I cheated. I'm not going to cheat anymore, and just be given a chance, some kind of chance.
Yeah, we need, like, an honor council for our sport. But I think that's a great example, and it's very illuminating. Like, and I'll tell you this: Aristotle, Book 5 of the Nicomachean Ethics, he talks about how there are situations, like with Oedipus, like, he was accountable to his actions. He did something terrible, but we give him grace. Like, he talks about the shrine of the graces and how, like, that act is forgiven, even though he acted with full moral responsibility. So justice, grace is part of justice. Justice is giving to each their own due. And so, like, trying to come up with, like, a categorical formula that people are owed is, like, a major headache, and it's going to get a lot of things wrong.
Well, and there is one other part of it, and that's the part that Derek just talked about, this Maudie Gorman coming out and saying, you know what, you got me, I cheated. Like, if we're going to say that you are cast out into the desert forever, then what's the incentive for anyone to ever come clean? I think that, and this happens on social media too, and this is something that is really bugs me. But I think that when somebody says, I was wrong, or I changed my mind, or whatever the case may be, we have to learn how to accept them and move on from that. We have to be able to accept, I totally fucked up and I'm a bad person and I'm going to get better. Because if we don't, then people will never have an incentive to do that.
Right.
Yeah, and I agree with that completely. Like I said, a lot of my followers don't. It's like, oh, damn them, they cheated. really kind of my realization was, this kind of follows somebody around was the Jane C.O. Case where she cheated in a half marathon. She stood on the podium, accepted her award, and all that. And so, I wrote about her because, again, I had a picture of her watch that showed she didn't do the full distance. She tried to bike the course afterwards to fake a GPS track. So it had everything I would write about, but I wrote about it. I never wrote her name. I'm like, I don't want someone to Google and see Jane C.O. and see her name related to this. So I didn't write her name, but New York Post wrote her name. Everyone else wrote her name. They wrote that she went to Harvard. They wrote that she went to the Huffington Post. So I realized at that point, okay, if I'm going to write something, I can't really protect them once it's out there. Even though I didn't publish her name, if someone else picks up on it, they may. And that's exactly what happened in that case. So, I've been more hesitant to, again, Jane may, if that same case happened again, that's probably one whose name I would still publish, be honest, but there's a lot of cases lesser than that where it's, okay, if somebody swapped a bib one time, I'm not going to post that picture. I'm not going to, I no longer,
right.
I post anything identifiable, or I try not to in those cases.
Which kind of goes to Derek and I's original argument, which was that I feel that public humiliation is a bigger wrong than marathon cheating.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Can I ask Scott? Can I ask you? Because I likewise have reservations about the social shaming, but think there should be some sort of accountability. So, what do you suggest in its stead? How do we hold people accountable?
It's tough. I think that in instances when Derek will come to you and Derek will say, "I'm going to write this article unless you come clean," I think that's a really good alternative.
I almost feel like that's kind of like blackmail. Like, hey, you could come clean, or I'm going to write an article. Now, if someone admits something beforehand, then hey, I'm not going to, I show more sympathy. But I struggle with, hey, admit to me that you cheated, or I'm writing an article. That seems a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a really hard question, and if public shaming, if we're not going to publicly shame the people, then what are we going to do? Maybe you go to the race director and you tell them that this person cheated. Maybe you give the information to them. Maybe there's a network of race directors that will share that information with each other, and they'll, ban you from a race or give you some sort of a penalty. I don't know, but I do know that 950 people sharing the article on Facebook talking about how this person is the worst person that ever lived and they should die doesn't seem just for cutting the course of the marathon either. So it's kind of a catch-22.
Right.
Yeah, but and kind of my point was if I never call out, if I only call out people who cheat to get podium spots, then what am I doing to deter the people who are cheating just for Boston qualifying spots? Okay, so if I take a step back, again, it's so 950 people may have called out, and I don't think 950 that many people would go to that extreme on most any case, but it gets shared to a lot of people. But I completely lost my train of thought. But again, that's part of the deterrent effect. Okay, so an article like Jane C.O. went viral. Do we know how many people did that stop from doing the same thing because they didn't want to be the next Jane C.O.? Yeah, so we can't quantify that. But again, I think again, part of my the goal of making some of this public is to A, make people aware, and B, stop people from doing it going forward.
Yeah. It's hard because our public square is so unwieldy. Like, we don't have, like, a town square or something.
Well, yeah, it's
the
like
internet.
Like the Salem witch trials. You had people admitting they were witches just because they thought they'd get, they'd be, given, some sympathy or some,
But it took like.
And then, so I don't want people saying, "Yeah, I cheated."
To find out about that.
Yeah, and then there's the whole other thing. It's again, this is kind of a journalistic thing, and I talked to the kid about this a little bit. You get people, write about it, then it's people aren't going to admit it, but it's like, oh well, I'm suffering from depression. You get all the excuses to try to stop you from writing an article, and then at what point you say, okay, hey, it's just not worth it. Is this person really depressed? Is this person really have mental issues, are really suicidal? Do I want to roll a dice and write an article on somebody who may be suicidal? Not typically, but it's, you get, I mean, you're running all kinds of, all kinds of stuff when, before writing an article and then after it comes out. And, so it's, I'm definitely more, I'd say I'm more conservative than I was, when I first started, when nobody was reading it.
Yeah. Oof. I wish I were more helpful to you. I don't.
No, you're great. I just kind of wanted your thoughts. I wanted your thoughts on that. I knew from your article that was something you're kind of, that you struggled with. It's like, you want accountability and you want to clean up, but is there a better way to do it? Kind of thing than this. And I think we know, from the Kelly Agnew. I mean, he had been disqualified from races before, but it wasn't public, and he kept on doing it. Right. So in those cases, I mean, I think it's a struggle, and I always, people always tell me, what if I get it wrong? So that's why I'm extremely careful not, to make sure I have something that shows the motivation before I write about somebody, somebody cutting a course or or whatnot. But it's just tricky on my end too. So I feel myself constantly shifting a little bit one way or the other. And I get as much when I stop giving bib numbers. I have just as many people yell at me for, why aren't you identifying this person, as I do when I identify somebody, and people going the other way. So,
well, we all know wherever Bill is right now, he's really happy because Sabrina Little totally fucking stumped me, and I didn't have an answer to her question, so she got me.
No one has the answer. It's one of those long-standing human questions.
Like, what's the best bad way to resolve the cheating problem?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, again, I think it's, and again, part of it is, and I think it's gotten better, is race directors and races, they when not to turn the cheek and not say, oh, don't worry about it. When they get reported in the past, they'd blow off people who'd report cheating or ignore it. Hey, they're on to the next race. So I think part of it is reacting to it, looking for it, and again, like Honolulu, don't hide the results. If you start disqualifying people and banning people from your events, then it's we'll stop getting the cheating would be less if there's actual consequences.
Although I think we're on to something. I think this Sabrina, she's a freaking smart cookie. And I think we're on to something with this the culture of running, the culture of humanity, our society. That we're not teaching people integrity. We're not giving people moral education. I think these are all really good, issues for us to kind of tag as possible, when we're trying to figure out, well, I want to know why it happens and how it happens. And what I really want is to get like Kelly Agnew to just sit down and just tell me the whole story, like I'm fascinated with how someone gets to that point.
Yeah, and it's funny, you want to talk to him, but the people who he's kind of crossed paths with, man, they want nothing to do with him. I listened to your interview with Jamel. I mean, he doesn't want, he's like, no, I don't care what he has to say. So you hear that too. So yeah, I mean, he's,
Or they say, don't give him a platform, don't put him on it, but I don't know. Just ethically, I think it's interesting. I just want to know how someone gets to that point.
Yeah, well, I think eventually if I can ever nail down the time, we're going to get, we'll get Alex Silbrick on. She was the one, the DECA man, who, well, I say she denies she, cut the laps, and I say she did. I think it was pretty obvious, but, so, we'll get her on and we'll get, her take, but again, she's not, but she won't admit it. Again, I want somebody at, Maud, I've messaged with her back and forth, but she just wants to move on. So she doesn't want to talk about it yet. But we'll get more of these on. Or we're going to go ahead.
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
Well, okay. So I just want to emphasize one thing, which is just so Baumeister talks about the myth of pure evil. He's the cognitive scientist I mentioned before. The myth of pure evil is this idea that, if someone is bad or perpetrates something terrible, then it's because there's some sort of malevolent evil creature over there. And I mean, it's just not the case. The people who've been called out on this site and Kelly, yeah, they've done really terrible things, but I mean, they're not moral monsters, you know. Like,
Nope.
it's probably just like this major region of your life that's just kind of like you've just kind of been blind to, or you just got completely out of hand. And there are ways in which all of us like have just blind spots in our character, and sometimes it's like jaw-dropping what we let ourselves get away with. And some people are more so in the unfortunate category of having like really not being great at self-rule, right? And they end up in these terrible marathon investigator scenarios. But I mean, we all like have these like normative failings and do bad things. So yeah, I just like don't want people to be like thinking of these people as like moral monsters when in fact they're just like screwed up like us.
Yeah, I mean, and you're totally talking my language too, because I've said this before and gotten shit for it. I don't believe in evil. I don't think there is such a thing as evil people. Even, you know, and we go deep on my show with one-on-one interviews where, you know, like I'm a recovering alcoholic, incest survivor. You know, there's been a lot of evil and, you know, quote-unquote evil in my past. And I'm with you. I think that it's flaws in logic. It's ethical blind spots. Or it's just, you know, sickness or wrong thinking. I don't think that anybody wakes up and says, I want to be evil, or, you know, sets out on the course of evil. I think they're just wrong. They're broken somehow.
Right. Well, so just to clarify, I do think there is such a thing as evil, like Hitler, for example. But yeah, I do. I agree with you in respect to the fact that we deceive ourselves a lot, and a lot of us aren't intentionally malevolent. A lot of us don't have the classical vices. It's not like we're consistently acting from malice or hate or injustice. We just like are pretty messed up.
But I'm going to push back then. I mean, don't you think that for someone to get to Hitler, to get to Dahmer, to get to Ed Gein, or any of these people, that there has to be something wrong with the wiring?
Right, but I don't think that those are mutually exclusive things. I mean, so you and I are agreeing about like on the level of action, we're just disagreeing about the meta-ethical level. So whether there can be something that's in fact wrong or in fact good, right?
Well, what he did and was in fact wrong, but what you're saying is there's this thing, and you're calling it evil, that is this, what is it, like a soul or a spirit inside of these uber bad people, that their motivation, rather than say the, you know, drunk or the bank robber or the guy that commits crime that, you know, just has some ethical blind spot. I don't see what the difference is between the two.
Okay, so right. Okay, so I'm not defining it as like a spirit or a force in that way. Like the way that Augustine describes evil is that it's sort of like an undoing of goodness. So evil is a privation. It's a lack of goodness. And my personal commitments are to there being things that are in fact good and in fact evil or bad or undone, irrespective of their impact on us. So an example of this is it might not be good for my personal flourishing to lose my life for the sake of my country or to save another person, but it might be in fact good. Like it might be the good action, irrespective of its impact on me.
So then how does that equate to the... Yeah, but then how does that equate to the bad of these uber bad people? Are they just, there's no goodness inside of them at all whatsoever? That's the distinction?
No, not at all. But there's certainly forms of undoing, right?
Sure.
So if you're not good, right, full stop, good, you just sort of are undone in certain ways. I wouldn't say that someone is pure evil. I don't think that there are people who are pure evil. But I do think that evil is I probably shouldn't have said anything, but it's just a category that I need to personally maintain because I will in all of my future publications for all of posterity.
Yeah. You don't want to be on record saying Hitler's not evil. We get
Right.
you. We get your point. But yeah, and the thing with Dahmer, and I'm just trying to bring this back into it, is as far as like nature was was he born? Was it? Let's bring it back to Dahmer. Let's lighten things up a little bit and bring it back to Dahmer. I actually went to college with I was in honor society with Jeffrey Dahmer's brother. With that, and he seemed perfectly normal, adjusted. Yet there's his brother who was so. To me, they grew up in the same house. You'd think of the same influences, and something was off with Jeffrey that didn't hit with his brother. So I'd say that there's you could say he was born evil, or maybe there was something happened externally that that pushed him that way. I don't know, but it is fascinating. And being Dahmer is definitely a far cry from cutting the course at Grandma's Marathon. But,
Yes.
there's definitely
matter of magnitude.
Yeah, exactly. We got bib swapping. We had bib swapping, then course cutting, then drugs, then Dahmer. So yeah, that's where it goes.
Hitler. You got Hitler in there.
Oh yeah. I put How do you rank Dahmer?
A lot of
Hitler?
stuff that I'm going to think about for sure. I mean, there's found out a couple of. It's like everyone on my podcast is going to be like, Scott, you got to get that Sabrina girl on. You guys could talk about ethics all night. It would be really interesting to us because they love it when I go down these rabbit holes for sure.
No, I think this has been great. I appreciate Sabrina's time, and you're mid. What, you live in the Midwest now, right, Sabrina? You moved from Texas.
I do.
Yeah. Actually,
yes,
we're not too far.
To Kentucky.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm Cincinnati area, so yeah, I remember seeing running Cincinnati. So yeah, you're not too far. You should go do North Coast again, or maybe go to Tennessee. Everyone do one of the last man standing. Want to do a Laz race?
Last man standing looks like so much fun. I would love to do that event.
Well, I'll tell you, I tied for second place at in the backyard. DNF with everybody else. I made 2 laps. So
While we're on the subject of races, I just wanted to quick jump in to let all your listeners know that if they're looking for a race in the Midwest in August, the Badger Trail Race is by 10 miles. But we're getting close to half capacity in a lot of these different events. So come on down, flat, trestle bridges, big tunnel, lots of beer. It's going to be a good time. Badger Trail Racing, August 3rd and 4th in Wisconsin.
Awesome, and I'm tempted. I'm tempted because you got the 36-hour cutoff for 100 miles. I think that's in my wheelhouse. I actually improved.
Yeah.
I did the North Coast 24 again. It was for the first time since that 2013. I did it this past year, and I improved. So, and I'm like I can't even do a 6-hour marathon now, but I managed to do 76 miles. So, like I said,
we made the 100 mile. We made the 100-mile cutoff 36 hours, the 100K cutoff 33 hours, because I want to give out a lot of buckles to people, especially some of the people that maybe have gotten older and they're not capable of finishing within the 30-hour cutoff traditionally. I want to hand out a lot of buckles. So come contact me. You can find it on just go to 10jumpmiles.com and go to 10 Jump Miles Racing.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm considering it. So we'll see. I'm doing the Flying Pig in May. North Coast 24 again in September. I don't think they've finalized that date yet. And then since I got swept from Dayton, from the Air Force Marathon prematurely, I got a free entry into there. So I'm doing that. And I'm also I think I'm going to be doing New York again if I can get in. So
that's awesome.
So what race, what do you got coming up, Sabrina?
I think I'm doing the 50K Trail Champs in February. And then I want to do either Nine Tails 50K or the Comset 50K Road Champs. And then I'm going to focus on the marathon for a bit. And then I'm not actually sure about what I'm doing in the fall. I'd like to do North Face for sure. But we'll see what else.
Nice. All right. Well, I think we've pretty much covered everything we possibly could, and then some. So,
yeah.
Put like a reading list at the bottom in the show notes too for all the books that we mentioned.
Yes.
It'll be really impressive.
Ooh, yeah, I'll do that. And I could put my Amazon affiliate link on that too.
Oh,
Nice.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Sabrina.
Thanks for writing this awesome article, too. It's really,
Yeah, and hey, where can people, again, state the website where you're writing for and your blog if you want to.
Sure. Well, I write for iRunFar.com on a monthly basis, so you can find me there. I'm on Twitter at Bean and Sneakers, but you can just look up Sabrina Little. I'm on Strava. I put all my training there. And on Instagram as Mrs. Little Engine That Could. So any of those places.
All right, very good. Okay, Sabrina, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
All right.
She was fucking smart.
Oh yeah, I could have told you that. Yeah, she's super nice, and I got that impression from 5 years ago when I say I raced with her. She was lapping me multiple times an hour.
I don't ever want to go head to head with her in a debate.
No, you guys. I know when to shut up. I know when I'm when I'm out of my element. But no, yeah, she's very, very, very smart. And,
do you think if we keep doing this, that eventually we're going to get to this point where we're going to feel like we understand the psychology of cheating just because we've thought about it from every possible angle?
Yeah, possibly. We got to get I got to be able to get some of the cheaters on. So, pushing on some of them, or the alleged cheaters, I should say. To be able to talk to somebody that admits to it and really, kind of get their thoughts, I think would be great. Would be great insight. So anyhow, I think we're going to wrap it up here. So again, go to Patreon if you want to support you can go for $3, $5. You can do a one-time patron, or you can do $10 to get access to bonus content. We did get another premium subscriber yesterday, so that's another $10 in the coffers, and that means two people can now listen to the Mike Rossi bonus content. So yeah, and we'll record some more. I think if we get a third person, maybe we'll record another bonus episode. So hey,
and keep telling a friend, do a review, rate and review the show on iTunes. It's more than just the Bill episode. We got a lot of other stuff going on and a lot of interesting stuff coming down the pipe.
Yep, absolutely. So, and again, remember, Scott, 10 Junk Miles, 10junkmiles.com, listen to his podcast. He had a great one with, I forget her first name, but it was Penn Jillette's wife.
Emily? Yeah. Wasn't that awesome?
Yeah, that was really cool. So Scott's getting getting spouses of very famous people, and very interesting in her own right. So I'm going to share that one on the page myself too, just so people get a taste of.
Next up, I have a guy that did the Gatorade 350-mile race across Alaska and kind of lost his mind. And it's a really good one too. It's 4.5 hours long, but it's a really good story.
Well, that would get me through half of my marathon.
Yeah, well, hey, I've been cranking them out, man. They go as long as they're interesting. And, that's why I don't want to. Maybe that's Sabrina I should stay away from, because we'd be 10 hours in talking about,
Yeah. I think you could talk about anything with Sabrina. So yeah, that might have been our longest one.
People are really going to like that. This is a really good one.
Thank you for listening to the Marathon Investigation Podcast. Have a questionable result to report? Visit marathoninvestigation.com to contact us, or email Derek at results@marathoninvestigation.com.
Another case closed for the Marathon's silent guardian.